Arrow Video has been releasing a good number of Japanese films over the last several years. They range from Takeshi Miike films to Japanese sci-fi to Japanese gangster movies, and this falls into that category, being that it's Japanese. This is like a Japanese punk movie from 1982 entitled Burst City, something I'd never heard of until the release came to me, and it's very very post-apocalyptic, sort of a Mad Maxy kind of world where these Japanese punks live like in this shanty town, and there are gangsters and there are concerts and people driving cars fast and motorcycles, and really just a tremendous amount of screaming. I'd never heard of this film until it came to me. I popped it in, and I love watching. One of my favorite ways to watch a movie, which is not always a luxury we all have, is to just throw something on or walk into a theater and not know what you're going to get and let the movie just work on its own terms. And that's what Burst City did for me. I had no idea what I was getting. And I didn't sense there was a whole lot of story in this film. As Joe Bob would say, not a lot of story getting in the way of the plot, or too much plot getting in the way of the story. It's basically a couple Japanese punk groups who play their music a lot, and then there are these gangsters who are trying to muscle in on the territory, and there's a prostitute, and there's other gangsters, and there's guys who work in it didn't make a lot of sense to me. It didn't. It was just really loud and very aggressive. A lot of shaky handheld camera. You know how much I love this. A lot of shaky handheld camera work that's far too close to the subject. And it was just, I couldn't believe that it was 2 hours. Now, I always joke that Japanese films are very long. And when somebody goes to pitch a film to a financier in Japan, the first question the financier says, okay, no, wait a minute. Before you tell me the story, is it 2.5 hours long? Oh, it is? Okay, great, we'll do it. Because this movie, I don't know why it took 2 hours to tell what it could have told in an hour and a half, or perhaps even 65 minutes. For me, it was very grating for me. Not particularly a punk fan, so that might be part of it, and not particularly overtly angry about everything in the world, so maybe the literally nonstop screaming might work better for other people. It really felt like something you might have seen on Night Flight back in the 80s, in the old days. It had kind of that sensibility to it. I'm sure it has its fans. I'm sure it's important in some way. I'm giving this incredible short shrift because I don't get it. But some of the music was okay, but for me it just kept going it was a loop of Japanese men screaming and fights and shaky camera work and somebody driving a motorcycle or a car and gangsters being gangstery, and then a band playing, and then screaming, and then fights, and over and over again. And I just disconnected at some point. I almost shut it off, but I decided, let me get to the end of this and see if anything different happens. And it really kind of doesn't. There was a moment, I thought, of successful drama involving the prostitute, or a moment of tragedy, let's say, to give something away. But otherwise, I had a hard time remembering who anybody was, and I just didn't care. I didn't really peruse the extras on this. The film looks good for what it is. It's shot in grainy, I'm going to guess probably 16 millimeter in its day. There's a commentary. There are several featurettes about the filmmaker and Japanese punk cinema and things like that. So if this is an area or genre you're into, I'm sure this is a really good release for you. It was just, as Austin Powers would say, it was just not my bag. Burst City is out now via Arrow Video on Blu-ray.